Hello friends, in this video we are going to talk about inheritance in Java. Inheritance is a key feature of object-oriented programming that allows a new class to inherit or use properties or attributes and behaviors or methods from an existing class. This promotes code reusability. With inheritance, there are two main terms which we need to know. The first one is the superclass. This is also called parent class, and this is a class from which properties are inherited. The other term is the subclass, also known as the child class. This is the class that inherits from the superclass. So with inheritance, the subclass is able to use attributes and methods which are defined within the parent class. Now let's see inheritance with an example. Within this program, I already have an athlete class which I created in the previous video. This athlete class stores information about given athlete. Each athlete has a name, discipline, and age. And then we have a constructor which we use to initialize the values of the attributes for the given athlete objects which are going to be created from this athlete class. So this is the constructor. And then we also have an extra method for displaying the details of the object which is going to be created from this athlete class. Now let's use inheritance in this video. We are going to create another class which is going to be a class for footballers only, and we are going to name this footballer class. And this new class is going to inherit from the athlete class, meaning that it is going to take all the attributes and methods defined in the athlete class, but we are going to add an extra attribute which is unique to the footballer class. So each footballer is going to have a name, discipline, and age, and the new extra attribute which we are going to add will be unique to this footballer class, which is the position, meaning the given position on the field in which the baller plays. As we know, there are some sports like tennis or boxing where we have maybe just one player which is playing at a given time. It is not a team sport, so we don't have different positions on the field for playing or for practicing those given disciplines. Since it is unique to footballers only, it means everybody created from this class is a footballer, and each person involved must have a position. So it makes sense to give this attribute only to a footballer class instead of giving it to the athlete class, since we know that there are some athletes who are not going to require any position because maybe it is a one-man sport or discipline which does not need different people at different positions on the field. And that is why we will create an extra class footballer, so that every footballer which we will create from this class will be able to have all the required attributes we want without needing to add an extra attribute to the athlete class, which will be useless for many of the objects. So I'm going to create a new class, as I said, which I'm going to call footballer. So I will say class, and the name of the class is footballer. So this is the class we have created. And then as we said, the footballer class is going to inherit all the properties and methods from the athlete class. So this is the footballer class we have created. Now, in order to specify that this footballer class inherits from the athlete class, we need to write a keyword after the class name footballer, give some space, and then we write extends. This is a keyword in Java. After extends, we specify the class which it extends from, which is the athlete class. Extend simply means footballer inherit from athlete. That means every property and method which is in the athlete class can be used in the footballer class, so or by an object of the footballer class. Now, since the athlete class had a name, discipline, and age as the attributes for the given object, we agreed that we are going to add an extra attribute for the footballer class, which is the position, and it is going to be a string. So I will say string position. And as you can see, we don't need to declare the other attribute again because it's already going to be automatically inherited from others into this footballer class. Now let's write our constructor for the footballer class. We already talked about what constructors are all about, so you should already be familiar with that. So I will just say public. The constructor should have the same name as the class name, so I will say footballer. And this time around, footballer class is going to take 4 parameters because the footballer class has 4 attributes in total, 3 which are inherited from the athlete class and 1 which is unique to the footballer class, which is the position. Okay, so this is the constructor for the footballer class. Now within our constructor, I will want to initialize the values for the given attributes of the footballer class for the object which is going to be created using this constructor. So instead of writing this.name equals name, this.discipline equals discipline, and this.age equals age, which we already did in the parent class, which is the athlete class, we can simply use a keyword known as the super keyword in order to call the superclass constructor directly into the subclass constructor. So I will say super and then open my parenthesis. Within the parenthesis, I will specify the attributes which I want to call from the parent class or from the superclass, which are the name. I want to take the name, discipline, and then the age. So this line simply means I'm going to the constructor of the superclass which footballer class inherits from, and then from the constructor of this superclass, I want to initialize the name, discipline, and age the way it's already done in this constructor of the superclass, so that I will not have to rewrite the same things within the constructor of the subclass. Now I will initialize the position attribute. Since it was not in the parent class, we must write it ourselves in the constructor for the subclass. So I will say this dot position will be equal to position. I repeat again one more time, the age, discipline, and name are being imported from the constructor of the superclass, as we can see on this line here, whereas for the position, we are initializing it ourselves on this other line. So this is all for the constructor of the subclass. Now the superclass also had this method that displays the details of the athlete. We are going to override this given method within our subclass. So what we mean by overriding a method is we are going to take this method from the superclass and then we are going to call it within our subclass, but we will change the implementation of the method, or in other words, we will change the body of the method. The method will still have the same return type, name, and parameter set, but it is going to have a different body. That is the meaning of overriding a method. So let's override this display details method in the subclass. And you should note that if we don't override this method in the subclass, the method will still be available in the subclass, but it will be exactly the same as it is in the parent class. But we don't want it to be exactly the same because, as you can remember, we added an extra attribute which was the position. So we want to also add a line that is going to display the position of the given footballer as we display the other attribute, but it is not done in this method for the moment. So that is why we will have to call it in the subclass and then override it. So I'm going to say public and then void. We will write the method name, which is display details. Now we could also write all of this, or we could just copy it lines of code from the constructor of the superclass, since it is what we want to also do in the subclass. But in Java, there is actually an easier way to go about this. I will also use the super keyword here, just like we did with the constructor. This time around, I will say super and then dot display details. This simply means that I want to go to the superclass and then access the method called display details within the superclass, and it is going to call the display details method from the superclass, meaning that everything which is in the body of the display details method is going to be copied in the body of the display details method for the subclass. So instead of copying and pasting all those things, I can just use this one line to do that. And then now I'm going to add an extra line which is going to also display the position of the given footballer. Okay, so now we have overridden the display details method in our subclass. We first called the display details method from the parent or from the superclass into the subclass in order to copy the body or everything that is in it to avoid repetition. And then we added this one line. And one thing we need to add when overriding a method in Java is an annotation. An annotation is simply a sort of comment we are writing, but this time around we are writing the comment to the compiler or to the IDE, not for the use of other programmers or ourselves. So it is something that it doesn't really affect our program or our code, but we write it to just indicate to the IDE or the compiler that this is what we are doing in this given point in time, so that the IDE or compiler can better understand what we are trying to do in the program. So one annotation we are going to use here is the override annotation. I will write it by writing an @ symbol, and then after that I will write override. It begins with an uppercase O, override. So this simply indicates that we are trying to override a method. This is not obligatory to use, but it is just a good practice to use the override annotation before overriding a method. But if we don't use it, it will still work. but as I said, it is a good practice to use it. Okay, now I think our footballer class is complete. We created a footballer class and then we made it to extend or to inherit from the athlete class. We added an extra attribute, the footballer class. In the constructor, we also initialized this extra attribute. And then finally, we have displayed the details of the footballer, including the details containing the extra attribute which we added. So now let's create an object of this footballer class. Or actually, in our main method, we will first create an object of the athlete class and then we will create another object for the footballer class. So to create an object of the athlete class, I will say athlete and then I will say AT1 for athlete 1 equals new athlete. The new athlete I will create is going to be Serena Williams, the popular tennis woman. And then next we have to specify her discipline, which is tennis. And then finally the age, I'm not very sure of her age, but I think she should be something like 41. I should have done a little bit of more research, but it's too late now. So I'll just say 41. I'm just assuming that to be her age. I'm not really sure. And then now I'm going to create an object of the footballer class. I will say footballer. And then the object name is going to be F1, which stands for footballer 1. Or let me actually say FB1. And the footballer I'm going to say new footballer to call is constructor 2. The footballer I'm going to create will be Cristiano Ronaldo. So I will say the discipline is obviously football. And then his age is 40. Position is, I will just say forward. In order to avoid this from moving to the next line, I will abbreviate his name a little. So let me just say C Ronaldo, because I prefer it to be on one line only. Okay, so I have Cristiano Ronaldo. Discipline is football. His age is 40 and he is a forward. You see that with the tennis woman, Serena Williams, athlete 1, we did not put any position because position is not an attribute defined in the athlete class. For example, it doesn't make sense to give a position to a tennis player. That is why we actually needed to create a different class footballer, since position, an attribute that is unique to footballer as compared to other sports. It's true that there are also other team sports where position is important, but I was just saying the general sense where it is not all disciplines that are collective sports and require positions. Now let's call the different methods of these classes. So I will first call the display details method from the athlete class at1.displayDetails, and then I will say footballer1.displayDetails. I'm going to give a bit of space between these two, so I will add a line that prints nothing. So this line is simply to leave an empty space in between the two different display details that will be printed. So you can see that with athlete 1, I have written athlete1.displayDetails and fb1.displayDetails. Display details is the name of the method from these two classes, but the output or the results are going to be actually different because we have overridden the display details method for the footballer class, which means it is going to be actually different from the details that will be displayed in the display details method of the athlete class. Now let's save this and we will check the output. Okay, we see this is for the athlete class. We have the athlete object. We have name Serena Williams, discipline tennis, and age 41. While for the footballer class, the object of the footballer class, we have name Cristiano Ronaldo, discipline football, and age 40 plus position, which is forward. So we can see that with inheritance, we are able to perform method overriding. That means we have a given method in two different classes, in the subclass and in the superclass, but the implementation or the body of that method in the superclass is different from the implementation of the same method in the subclass because it has been overridden. And we can also see that with thanks to inheritance, we had our class which is athlete class with all of these attributes and methods, but we wanted to create another class which was the footballer class that was also supposed to use all of these similar attributes or information that are already found in the athlete class, But thanks to inheritance, we did not need to rewrite all of those lines of code again, because inheritance permits us to already use all of the attributes and methods defined in one class within another class. So that is the main advantage of inheritance. It permits us to do what is called code reuse or avoid unnecessary repetitions. So guys, that is inheritance in Java. I hope you found this helpful.